Hi and welcome back to my channel. My name is Sarah and today I'm going to talk about some of the books I'd like to try and get to this summer. So I'm not the sort of person that's very good at sticking to a strict TBR. I'm definitely a bit of a mood reader. I like to pick up a book when I feel like I'm in the right mood for it. There's nothing worse than reading a book that you think you would like if you're in the mood for it but you're not in the mood for it. However, I do like to have a list, like a selection of books that I can pick from, and so this is a good way to work it for me. If I make a list of 9 books that I'd like to read this summer, then that's only 3 books a month. It still gives me scope to pick up other things when I fancy it, but it also gives me a little bit of structure to my reading, because sometimes if you finish a book and you have no idea what you want to read next, you can waste so much time trying to select a book off of your TBR. So this is definitely a good way to work it for me. If you've seen my video where I discuss all of the unread books on my TBR that I want to get to before the end of the year, you may notice that not a single book from that list is on this list. And that's just because those books have been on my TBR for a long time. I need to read 5 of them a month to finish them all by the end of the year, and that's definitely still my priority. But I wanted to make a list of books that I don't have that I'm excited to get to as a way to try and sort of prompt me to pick them up, because sometimes I can have a book on my in a TBR list for years, and if I don't own it and I never find it in a secondhand bookshop, then I just never get to it. So this is a good way when I'm in the mood for some of these books to force me to go and find them. So there's a good selection of books on this list. Some of them are classics, some of them are books that I think are quite summery, and some of them are books that are like new releases that I've heard other people talk about that I'm excited to get to. So the first book on this list that I'd like to get to is Near to the Wild Heart by Clarice Lispector. I've heard so many people talking about Clarice Lispector and how much they love her, and I just want to be part of the fun. I want to join the party. However, I read The Hour of the Star by Clarice Lispector, and it's very short. It's only like 80 pages. I maybe read that a couple of years ago, and I just didn't love it as much as I thought I was going to. I think partly because I tend to not really enjoy very short books. Also, it was quite fragmentary. I didn't really get a sense of who she was as a writer from it. And so I've heard that Near to the Wild Heart, I think it's her first novel, and it's more of a linear narrative. So I think that will be a good place to start for me with Clarice Lispector. And then I can move on to some of her weirder stuff that's a bit less of like a normal novel, once I've got an idea of who she is as a writer. So that's the first book I'd like to get to. I have no idea how long this one is, and I also don't own it, nor does my library have a copy. So I'm going to have to buy a copy of this one. Probably have to buy it new, because I had a look on some secondhand book websites and they didn't seem to have like a copy that was less than £8-9, and then I think, well, I might as well just buy it myself. However, my birthday is at the start of August, so for some of these I could ask for them for my birthday. Obviously, then doesn't give me a lot of time to read them, but that is an option. Then the second book I'd like to get to is You Dreamed of Empires by Alvaro Enrigue. I heard Sarah over at Hardcover Hearts talk about this book and how amazing it was, and I've read his previous book, which is called Sudden Death, and I read this book years ago. I actually have a really good memory of reading this book, because when I first met my boyfriend, we were living in Barcelona and he was going to go away travelling for a few months, and we went to a big bookshop in Plaza Catalunya in Barcelona, and we went to the English book section, and they had a really limited selection, and we just randomly both picked up a copy of this book so that we could read it when we were apart and discuss it. This book follows a tennis match between Caravaggio and Hernan Cortes, and it was just a really strange read, but we both really enjoyed it, and yeah, it was just a really fun experience because we both read it and we had a chat about it over Skype, and it was good fun. So when I heard he had another book out, I was really intrigued, and then when Sarah was talking about it, she was saying that it sort of also follows the conquistadors and their court that they set up when they arrive in America. So it's obviously, this one's about Hernan Cortes as well. It seems to be a theme that he's interested in, so I'm really intrigued to pick that up and see how it compares to this one. I also don't own a copy of that, and it's not in my library either, so I probably will need to buy it new as well. Then the third book that I want to get to is A Room with a View by E.M. Forster. My library does have a copy of this one, so I can borrow it. I have read 2 of his books previously. I read Howard's End a while ago, like I want to say 4 years ago maybe, and I didn't love it. I thought the pacing of it was a bit off, but then last year I read A Passage to India by Ian Forster, and I really, really loved it. I really liked the commentary on colonialism and race, and I just thought it was a really thought-provoking read, and it made me want to go back and, well, for one, reread Howard's End, because I think maybe I missed a lot of the nuances in it. I was taking it more as a novel, and I thought it was like strange things were happening that didn't make sense really. But if I look at it through the lens of his critique on the world, I might get more out of it. So I'm really interested to try A Room with a View, to see how I feel, and then if I enjoy it, then I might go back and reread Howard's End. This book also is quite a summery feel. I think it's set, I believe, in Florence, and I think it's a love story. So yeah, I'm going to give this one a go, and as I say, I can borrow it from my library, so even if I don't enjoy it, I've not invested any money into it. And then next, I would like to read either of these two books. I've not decided yet. I'd either like to read the Penguin book of Korean short stories or the Penguin book of French short stories. I originally was going to read the French one, but there are 2 volumes of the French one. I think volume 1 is older, like more classical short stories, and volume 2 is more contemporary stuff. I would rather read volume 2 because I think that it's probably going to be of more interest to me. However, it seems a bit strange to pick up volume 2, and I guess maybe if you read volume 1, then you get a sense of the development of the short stories over the course of time in France. But I don't really want to have to read all of volume 1, so I'm unsure. I have read already 2 books from this series. So I read the Penguin book of Japanese short stories last year. This is such a pretty book. I really like the cover of it. I got it for my birthday, and I read it pretty much straight away, and there was quite a wide selection of stories. Some of them by really well-known authors. You know, there are stories from Murakami in this, and some by authors that, well, for one, don't seem to have really written much else, or at least not much else that's been translated, or just authors that I hadn't heard of before. I didn't love every story in the collection, like that's not the point, you're never going to, but I read some really good stories that made me then pick up books by the authors, or at least do a bit of research into them and see what I could find. So I really enjoyed this one. And then, because I'd enjoyed it so much, I picked up the Penguin book of Italian short stories, and this is edited by Jhumpa Lahiri. I didn't enjoy this one as much. I think that there were some stories that I did like. I like at the start of both of these books, in the contents, I've like put a little asterisk next to the ones I really liked, so I can go back and see which authors I'd like to read again. I found that there was less variety in this collection. There were a lot of stories written by sort of older men, or at least older male characters that were quite objectifying towards women. I found a lot of the stories were just quite sort of slice of life, less experimental stories, which I think when you're reading a collection of stories, you want to have a full scope of everything. So I did like this one, but not as much as the Japanese one. So if anyone's read either the French or the Korean, please let me know which one I should go for. Next, I would like to read Cancer Ward by Aleksander Solzhenitsyn. I don't know if that's how you say his name. Something similar to that. I took the Gulag Archipelago out of the library last year, but it's such a big book, and someone else had reserved it, so I had to take it back before I really got to it. And then I was at a B&B type place with my mum like last month, and they had The First Circle by him on the bookcase, and it was huge, and I was really tempted to pick it up because it was one of these places where you could just like take a book and leave a book, but I thought I would like to go with a thing that I think I'm going to like the most to try a new author, because it was like a 600-700 page book, The First Circle, and I've heard really good things about Cancer Ward. I think it is set in a cancer ward, which is not something I would normally go for. That sounds really depressing, but I've heard that the characters are really like funny, and it's like sad, but it's also uplifting. So I'm really interested to give it a go, and he's got loads of other books, so I think if I like it, then I've got like a whole back catalogue of books by him. Okay, so next I want to try and read The Hobbit by Tolkien. I have not read any Tolkien. I've not even seen all of the Lord of the Rings films, because it's not really my sort of thing. Although having said that, I've not seen them, so I can't really comment. Because I'm not really much of a fantasy viewer or reader, but I would like to be, because I feel like people that read fantasy books have such a fun time. Like, I watch quite a lot of YouTubers that are really into fantasy books, and it just seems like so immersive. It's just like a good adventure to follow along on, but quite often I don't really like the writing style of these books. I find them too action-packed, not enough character focus, and yeah, I just feel like sometimes the writing's quite basic, especially for sort of more contemporary fantasy. So I thought it would be a good idea to start with a very well-known author who's very well loved, and see how I got on with that. And then hopefully I'll like it, and I then have the whole Lord of the Rings series to read and watch, and yeah, potentially other books by Tolkien. So that's my plan. This one I've reserved from the library. I'm next in line to get it, so hopefully it should be with me in like a month max. Okay, so 3 more books. So I have Notes of a Crocodile by Miaojin. I'm really sorry if I'm butchering that. I read Letters from Montmartre by this author and didn't really enjoy it. Just because it was sort of letters to her lover, and they were no longer together, and they were all very sad and pensive, but I didn't really get a sense of their relationship. It was all just like discussing how much they missed each other and how much they loved each other, but I didn't get like many details about their relationship, so I didn't feel invested in it. But Notes of a Crocodile, I've heard loads of people read. She's a Taiwanese author, and I'm pretty sure it's a queer book. I think that what I've heard is that being a crocodile in Taiwan, I think, is the same as being queer, or maybe just someone that doesn't really fit in. It's a really short book. I think it's about 115-20 pages, and this one has been on my list to read for so long. Like, the only reason I picked up Letters from Montmartre is because I saw it in a charity shop, and I really wanted to read Notes of a Crocodile. So because it was by the same author, I picked it up. But I feel like I just need to give this one a go. It's so short, I just need to commit to buying it. Like, I've wanted to read it for years. So that's on my list. And then 2 other books that I've managed to reserve from the library. The first one is The Trees by Percival Everett. This was shortlisted for the Booker Prize last year? The year before? I'm not sure now. And it's a crime book, which is what has put me off, because I don't really read much crime. Anything that has a crime aspect I sort of lose interest in, because for me, as soon as the murderer is revealed, I kind of just forget about it. Like, it's just like, oh, okay, and then I move on with my life. However, I was watching, I think it was Louise from Louise Savage Muse's channel, and she was saying how quirky The Trees was and that she'd never read another book like it. And if there's anything that's going to get me to read a book, it's when someone says, like, I've never read anything like it. I'm like, okay, well, I've got to give it a go. So I saw that my library had a copy, so I have also reserved it, and it's in transit, so it should be with me shortly. And then I was only going to read 8 books, but the other day I was watching a video by Jasmine Reeds, and she was talking about the best books she's ever read from the Women's Prize, or books that should have been longlisted for the Women's Prize, and she said that one of her favourite books ever is Moon Tiger by Penelope Lively, and this book won the Booker Prize, I think, when it came out in the 80s, and it's a woman reflecting on her life and the interconnectedness of the universe is how I think Jasmine described it. And I love a book that goes from one person's life and sort of like spans out into the whole world. So this one, again, I think is quite short, and it's in transit. It should be with me shortly. So those are some books I'd like to get to this summer. If you have any other recommendations for me, please let me know. I am really hopeful that I will get to all of these. As I say, some of them I have reserved already, so they'll definitely come to me before the end of the summer, and yeah, the other ones I'm going to make a point of trying to buy or ask for my birthday for someone to get me them. So yeah, stay tuned if you'd like to hear me talking about these books.